Greetings. In this week's Future Trends Forum, we take a deep dive into the question of accessibility, specifically how to make academic materials more accessible for more learners. Our conversation was very rich. We had a lot of accessibility professionals, officers, and scholars in the mix, so I think you'll find the conversation very fruitful. Now, in the show notes, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to add some links that came up in the chat during our conversation. So if those are valuable, please let me know in the comments. And in fact, if any of this is valuable, or if you have any reactions, thoughts, or recommendations, please, the comment box is open for you. I hope this session is useful for you. Enjoy. All right. Enough of the fun and games. Let me begin by introducing the program and welcoming everybody. Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. I'm so glad to see you all here today. We have a terrific guest who is talking about a vital subject, and I can't wait until we get to have the conversation. And for those of you who have been to the forum before, welcome. And for those of you who are new, extra welcome. Glad to see you. We've been touching on all kinds of issues around educational materials over our decade of work. We've talked about copyright, we've talked about open education materials, we've talked about multiple media, we've talked about the role of video and virtual reality, as well as AI, but we haven't really done enough with accessibility, which is such a huge issue of great import. And that's why I'm really excited to welcome this week's guest, because Diana Theisinger has published a couple of really good articles. One specifically on making PDFs accessible, which is so vital given how widespread PDFs are. But also she thinks carefully about trying to get institutions to change, to actually take accessibility seriously. So let me just welcome Diana. And Diana, tell me, where are you coming from today? You're in your office on campus, right?
Yes, I am joining from Williamsburg, Virginia, the beautiful William and Mary campus, where I am have a back-to-back day of talking and thinking about accessibility. I was telling Brian, or just a few minutes ago, I got off a faculty development session about digital accessibility, adding alt text and using headings and styles to make documents more accessible.
Which is so important. And I find AI chatbots actually do a much better job at that than human, really pumping out headers than we do. Diana, we have a particular way that we introduce people. We try to avoid the academic obituary style that we all love. I'm talking about what you did in the past. And we ask people, what are you going to be doing in the next year? What are the big ideas and also the big projects, the stuff you plan on working on for the next 12 months?
Yes. So most of my work is in the course development space. So a little bit of undergraduate for-credit online courses, but also in the professional learning, alternative credential, continuing and executive ed space. So a lot of projects in both arenas, building out some online programs, and William and Mary has a relatively small online footprint. So that's a lot of times we're in uncharted territory in terms of like which campus partners do we need to recruit? How are we going to work with the registrar for this new model, for example?
Well, is that going to be a synchronous class, asynchronous class, or something else?
Yes.
Yes.
All of the above. So,
well, that sounds great. That sounds really important to have. And what kind of accessibility work are you going to be doing?
So related to accessibility, this definitely came across my desk as an other duties as assigned type thing. I am in a teaching and learning center, and I'm a program manager for online programs. And in the course of, as there was more attention being paid to this April 2026 deadline, we needed to designate a person to kind of lead that work. And I have an extensive background in accessibility. I don't know, I started teaching in K-12, and I don't know if anybody remembers a software called Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Yeah.
But in my earlier career, or my previous life, I guess, I trained students and parents and teachers how to use Dragon Naturally Speaking. And what was the other one was like Read and Write Gold. That was basic screen reader technology.
Yeah.
Anyway, so because I had that prior knowledge, when the university sat up and said, oh, we do need to pay attention to accessibility, I was tapped from the Teaching and Learning Center perspective to help out. And anyone who's involved in this work, and I'm assuming that you're at least touching on it if you're on the call today, you know that this is not a one-person job. So I have so many brilliant colleagues who are also just heavily involved in this work in our libraries, in the IT field, at all the different professional schools. So it's a many hands situation now, but I'm fortunate to lead some of it.
Well, and I think the institution is fortunate to have you leading some of it.
Oh, thank you.
Friends, if you're new to the forum, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of questions to our poor guest, and we'll give her a chance to unfold what she's thinking about and working on. But then it's going to be over to you for your questions and your comments. So as we go, think about what you'd like to know about accessibility. And that can play out in any kind of level. And by the way, please don't be afraid to ask any question. We're very friendly here. And if you're thinking of a question, it's one that we have to be thinking about. So I just want to ask a quick one to begin with, which is April 2026. You mentioned that in passing, and I've heard rumors and trembles of this in the ether, but it's not getting a lot of attention. What's happening April 2026 that we need to be thinking about?
Well, maybe. So as currently written, there is a federal deadline that goes into effect that says all digital content has to be made accessible for people with all types of disabilities. It's not just digital content, the guideline also extends to physical spaces and the accessibility of physical spaces. But my team works on the digital content piece. The maybe part of that is because those guidelines were written and that deadline was imposed by a previous federal administration. So if in some far-flung imaginary universe, the Department of Education went away, then it could be that that guideline or that deadline kind of poof disappears. So we actually in our work try not to lean in too much to the April 2026 looming thing. Number one, because even if the federal landscape were different than what it is right now, we know that deadlines tend to move. You know, look how many times Real ID moved before it was actually enforced. So we don't lean too much into the like do it or else thing. I see there's a question in the chat about is it for all higher institutions or for public? I think it's anyone who receives federal funds.
So it's everybody except Hillsdale.
So yeah, Caroline, I take your point. Nothing like a federal deadline to get people motivated. So yeah, we really try to de-emphasize that and just talk about belonging as a core value at our institution. And so if we want people to feel like they belong, then we need to make content accessible for different types of learners.
So what are the kinds of accessibility that you're working on? I mean, are you looking at visual accessibility for people with visual impairments, physical accessibility for people, you mentioned spaces, not just materials. Are those the two big ones?
I'm not working in spaces. There are people on campus who are working on that. I'm working primarily in instructional content that is shared in a digital format. So anything that goes into our learning management system, anything that an instructor might email, post, share online with learners, some of our teaching resources that we develop to share with faculty, we're trying to model best practices by making those accessible for screen readers is the primary category that we're looking at. So we have a tool built into Blackboard, which is our learning management system in the undergraduate space. We have a tool called Ally that provides alternative formats of documents for students, but only if instructors have uploaded an accessible version of the document. So if the instructor uploads an accessible version of a PDF, the student can then download it as a podcast and listen to it, or download it for use with a screen reader or I think it even converts to Braille if they're using, that's a relative low incident disability, but it has a lot of options there for them.
Wow. 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 Well, I'm glad that you're focusing on one part of accessibility services. The the other question I wanted to ask, and the questions are starting to pile up in the chat, so I'm going to ask just quickly one and get out of the way, which
Yeah.
is, what can you, what advice can you give us? What tips and tricks about getting faculty and staff to actually take the time to learn how to make their stuff accessible and to actually do it? We were joking before the program began about alt text, about getting people to do alt text. And if you're new to that, that's a text field which purportedly describes an image that's attached to an image as a form of metadata. But that takes an extra step to ask people to do. Or you mentioned headers, for example. How can we get people to actually do this work?
It's so hard. So if anyone on the call has figured it out, please be in touch right away.
Please, in the chat.
Yeah, I, it is a hearts and minds thing. There's no, I don't think the federal deadline even matters for this. Like, we're not going to force people or berate them or scare them into caring about this. However, most instructors, most, not all, care about students and student learning. And so for most of the instructors I interact with, when I point out the ways that making their course materials accessible, or at least more accessible, like progress over perfection, the ways that that benefits not just students with disabilities, but all learners, there's often, a light bulb moment. And once it becomes a little bit less scary and they see like the entry point or the path for them, we've actually had pretty good uptake. We've tried several different models. There's one that's like most promising. I'm happy to share more about that, but I'm going to pause for a minute. So,
well, I think we have a bunch of questions and comments.
yeah.
So let me just bring through a few of these. Our friend Noah Geisel is cheering on your collaboration with registrars, which is a great thing to mention. We have some questions about Ally. So Grace Ma wants to know, does Ally report if the document isn't accessible PDF?
It does. It will say this document has been scanned but not OCR'd, which is an acronym for optical character recognition. And that just signals, hey, a screen reader can interact with this, or on the student side, Ally can provide alternative formats of this document because it's not just a picture, it's something that it can recognize as text.
Nice. Yeah, I think we're all sick of people not scanning as images, but not as text. And Eden Jones has been adding a lot. So I just want to say hello, Eden. Shout out to you for doing a lot of work in the chat. Thank you so much for doing this, along with Bansha. Eden mentions you can download the eBraille file from Ally, which is good to know. On a related point, Jennifer Albat mentions that she leads an instructional design group. The thing that she's most concerned about scaling are audio descriptions on videos. We need to train our faculty on how to do this, which they probably won't, but we ourselves are not trained to create audio descriptions. I cannot find one under $3,000. We struggle getting our faculty check their captions, much less creating audio descriptions. Which is what that's fascinating, Jennifer. Diana, do you want to take a run at that one?
That is a really sticky wicket. It is, I think so. One of the fine points in these guidelines, auto-generated captions don't count. They're not good enough. And so I don't know if she's on the call. I was just reading Sarah Silverman's LinkedIn post about this last week. She posted about this problem with the auto-generated captions. And like, even when we're thinking about student-facing material, if we wanted students to use a video-based discussion board, are we now going to train students to go in and correct their captions? Or are we going to say that, okay, these auto-generated captions make it accessible? Do we then make those activities that have auto-generated captions attached to them optional instead of required? Which I'm not even sure we have legal coverage on that I think if we share it, even if we say it's optional instead of required, it still is opening us up for liability.
Oh.
I'm not a lawyer though, so don't come at me about that.
No, but I mean, friends, if you're new to the accessibility world, we're going through a whole bunch of key topics and ideas and facts, and one of them is a lot of this is driven or shaped by either litigation or the threat of litigation. Jennifer, thank you for mentioning this. Are you talking about having faculty record audio or having them make text captions which can be turned into audio? While she's thinking about that, Noah has a great link to a free community practice about credential innovation, which is something that we've been tracking for many years. So thank you, Noah, for that.
UPSIA has a great one too. I'll put a plug in for them. UPSIA has a great credential innovation network. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Mark Corbett Wilson, as always, a hero in the chat. He shared some links to some good resources, including government sites on this. But he also observes this, quote, "It takes me more time to describe an image than to create the document or a post. Bots are good for creating alt text," unquote.
Yeah, agree 100%. And the good thing about the federal nature of this guideline is that we've seen so many companies and vendors and providers respond with additional accessibility tools. So I think now when you paste an image into Word, it automatically suggests some alt text, and then you can approve or revise it. But that's a huge time saver for people who are creating image heavy documents. And I think we're going to see more of that functionality coming to other spaces as well.
Now, given that AI has the hallucination problem, we actually had a couple of guests who passionately made the case for reframing that as mirage. So I keep trying to think of.
I like that.
It's really smart. But if AI errors from time to time, I mean, is that a price to pay for getting actual captions, or do you want to involve people in helping correct them, or any thoughts on that?
I think it's all a balancing act. What is actually sustainable and what is our core work as instructors? Is our core work ensuring 100% accessibility for everything we produce, or is our core work doing the best we can with the time that we have and making individual accommodations when our universal best practices haven't been enough for an individual learner? I think about the enormous pressures on especially faculty who are on that tenure journey to produce research and publications, to bring grant funding in. And I worry that if we set the bar as perfect or nothing, that they're not going to even attempt to engage in the work. But if we say, let's make some progress, let's see if we can do a few small things to proactively create accessible content, it becomes a little bit more, I don't know, achievable.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very wise. I mean, I love that we can benefit not only from your research and thinking about this, but from clearly a lot of work and going through this, trying to deal with resources. And many institutions are going to be suffering from constrained resources this year, it seems. To answer your frantic plea for help, we've had a few people have volunteered some ideas about how to get faculty and staff motivated. Our dear friend at JPL, Carolyn Coward, has two pieces. One is you have to be passionately committed to accessibility, which she says is an extension of equity. So I think that's a very, very important angle. But also this, we were all temporarily able as a wake-up call. I can vouch for that personally. That's very, very powerful. But there was one more beyond this. Carolyn also shared some good reading on this. Brenda Boyd says that teaching learners how to develop accessible materials will help them throughout their careers. So it's an investment, kind of professional development. Thank you, Brenda. So we've got some help, some ideas, but we also have more questions. Christy Cunningham says that she puts lots of screenshots in her presentations, then uploads the slides to classes. Do you have any advice for describing screenshots in alt text?
Well, I'd want to know more about what is the screenshot,
Hmm.
and how essential is it to
Mhm.
learners? What processes or content are being shared in that screenshot format? And then, you got to do a little cost benefit analysis there on your time. And it might be, if you have a very visually heavy content area or subject that you are working on, that it's going to be more efficient for you to record a voice track explaining what everything is all about, or a recorded audio lecture where you're providing an alternative means of accessing that content, rather than trying to have detailed alt text for every image. But I would need to know more about the content.
Well, that's a very, very thoughtful answer. And it, this is one that I run into a lot as well. Personally, in my work, I share a lot of screen captures. And I think this is a very good question. Um, we have a whole bunch of questions coming in. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask them. And there are a couple that are on the same issue. Ron Friedman asks this: will there be an issue with displays of mathematical equations created, e.g., in Word or math type, or chemical biological structures or drawings in regard to accessibility? Eden Jones says this is a huge problem. They're expensive solutions, but we're looking for better ones. But along with that, someone followed up. Um, let me sure. Carolyn Coward says scientific charts and graphs with colors are impossible for learners with visual color limitations, aka color blindness. I mean, do you have any advice for people working on equations, charts, and graphs like that?
There are more tools coming out every day. I don't have a solution for organic chemistry yet. It's more of an art class almost a than a science class, when we look at how heavily visual it is, how nuanced it is, how important it is that students gain the ability to kind of demonstrate chemical relationships visually. And these are hand drawings, so there's just not a way to yet to recognize and provide alt text in a meaningful, sustainable way. So I think that's an ongoing challenge for sure. And I give organic chemistry as an example because I've just been supporting our chemistry department, but I know there are other fields where that would also apply. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear the point brought up about, for example, color blindness, because I think sometimes instructors get stuck on this. Well, I've never had a student with visual impairments. No one's ever told me that they can't see my content. And just really trying to reframe the conversation around, this is beneficial for everyone. This is beneficial for an English language learner who couldn't interpret the key that you attached to that graph that was color-based. This is beneficial for somebody who didn't realize that they were colorblind until they got into your class. And for the first time, they were like, what do
Oh,
you
wow.
mean the difference in these two lines? It's less likely to
Wow.
happen at the college level, but it's the higher stakes at the college level. I'm going to pause because I feel like there are a lot of other questions, and I think I addressed that one.
Well, that's great. I'm sorry, I missed somebody else mentioning that they teach math, and they have a similar issue with that as well. Sarah Hildebrand, she said, we're struggling making graphs and diagrams accessible
Yeah.
without giving away the features that we're asking students to identify. Then Dana
Yes.
Dawson responds. She says that we've created a complex visual elements accessibility working group with folks in math, chemistry, health sciences, etc., to grapple with this. Dana, where is that working group? Is that based in one particular institution or state, or
yeah, that's at Temple University. Yeah, we as a lot of people have said, have started doing lots of workshops like Diana's talking about to try to address the WCAG guidelines. That's redundant. The web content accessibility guidelines. And yeah, some of the biggest questions that we got was, how do we deal with formulas and charts and graphs and not giving away not giving away the answer with all text and so on. And so we just decided to create a working group to try to, we don't have the answers. I work at a teaching and learning center and we don't know the answers. So we figured we would just make it a group effort to try to figure out how to address these questions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we have math jacks now integrated into Blackboard, but what I'm hearing from instructors is that it's very limiting. It just is not sophisticated enough for what they are trying to convey and communicate.
What was it called? Math jacks?
Math jacks with an X on the end, because math. So.
Well, thank you. And Dana, that project sounds great. Good luck.
I think we'll need it.
I think so too.
Yeah, Dana, I'll be in touch.
We have some tool-based questions. Madeline Rankin asked if anyone uses a specific video CMS, such as Yuja or Panopto, to help with captions. And Eden recommended Panopto, which is its ASR captions are good, but always need revision, but it'll do 90% of the work.
Yeah.
And then there's some talk about Canvas Studio, and Eden Jones thinks Panopto is better than Canvas Studio. So that's really important to have. Diana, are there any accessibility tools that we should be thinking about that are either very bad that we should avoid, or that are good and we haven't talked about them so far?
I'm not going to say that something is very bad and you should avoid it in front of all of these people. I'm just not.
You're so kind.
Because somebody will be like, that's what we have. It's the only tool.
Well, that's what a good one though.
I do like Panopto. We use that for video captioning, and I like that it provides additional end user options in terms of like, how do I prefer to consume content? Do I want to see my instructor talking side by side with the slides, or do I want to just focus on the slides? I like that flexibility and choice for the learner. I think your 90% stat might be content dependent. I'll come back to chemistry and say, we're not approaching 90% even when we go and request human captioning in Panopto, because there's so much technical jargon. And also with lecture capture, just your sound quality isn't as crisp and precise. Other tools that I'll just give the general endorsement for check and see if the tools that you're using have built-in accessibility checkers, because most of them do now. And I've been heartened to see people even rallying around kind of a globally agreed upon symbol for accessibility. When you see the little person figure, the little humanoid icon in the circle, I've seen it in LMSs, I've seen it in Microsoft Word, I've seen it in Google Docs and slides. And it will check the document and give you feedback about how accessible it is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. Oh, that sounds so helpful. Thank you. We've had conversations going in all kinds of directions, and this is where I want to have the chat box modeled in 3 dimensions, right? So we can trace all the different threads. Noah Geisel shared this powerful story. He says that what changed his perspective was someone told him, quote, "What to you may be a small inconvenience is to someone else a daily struggle for dignity. You have the ability to, with minimal effort on your part, reduce their exhaustion to do what are everyday experiences." Tough to feel good about arguing with that. Thank you, Noah. Yeah, that's really well said. That's very well said. Kristen Morrison shares Algonquin College's concise instructional video on how to apply alt text images in Microsoft Suite. Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you. That works really well. Well, that should work really well. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And Laura Foley recommends teachaccess.org. She says she tells her faculty about that at every opportunity, which I haven't had. I don't think I've looked at. Jessica Lutters says they have a full course in our LMS that teaches all the elements of making accessible digital content. It teaches through video and text-based documents. It's open to everybody. And it already has a fan. Donna loves it a lot. So those aren't questions, those are observations and comments. But we do have another question. This is from Andrea, who says, when linking students to external sources like websites or an online article, to what extent is the instructor responsible for making the external content accessible?
So legally or ethically, or like, are we looking at letter of the law or spirit of the law, you know?
Good question.
Again, I don't have a legal background. In general, I would say that the external source is the external publisher is going to be responsible when it's linked out. I think it's probably only a matter of time, and in fact, could have already happened, that somebody will be in legal hot water for linking to external sources and saying this is required to pass my class, it's required reading, and they have not themselves provided an accessible pathway to that or ensured that the link out leads to an accessible pathway. But if we're looking at like institutional data, our ally score as an institution doesn't score links. So if I put an inaccessible PDF on my Blackboard site, I'm going to get dinged on my accessibility score. If I put a link to that same inaccessible PDF hosted on someone else's site, 100% accessible. Like I don't get counted down, if that makes sense. So
it does.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because when this question first came up, my first thought was, well, that would disincentivize someone to link externally because they wouldn't be able to control what the student experienced. But if they would only be dinged for what they own themselves and not the external ones, then that wouldn't disincentivize them. Perhaps the opposite. What a great question. I mean, well, here's a dumb question from me. I mean, in terms of the whole web, the whole World Wide Web, who's responsible for accessibility? I mean, there's no organizational top-down management for the web. There's stuff for the backbones, and different nations have things, but where does accessibility come in? Is this something entirely done by motivated individuals like yourself on a document by document basis, or is there any other powerful driver trying to make the web more accessible?
I do think that the guidelines are trying to address accessibility, but through the mechanism of saying if you receive federal funding, then at a federal level, we're requiring you to make things accessible, including your website. But for example, Brian, you have a website.
Websites.
What happens if where's the mechanism for enforcement? Or it's really has to be, if you have a mindset of wanting that to be accessible to the most people, are you going to do the due diligence to make it so?
I have a friend who's an accessibility paladin. He works with a great outfit called Benetech that works on accessibility. And his line he uses with publishers is great. He asks publishers, would you ever dream of not selling your materials to people with red hair? And publishers say, no, that would be stupid. Why would we do that? And he's okay. So why do you make your materials inaccessible to people with visual impairments? They go, yeah. The publishers are different than academics. I mean, that's a different piece of this. But so this is still an open space. In the chat, Brenda Boyd recommends Quality Matters with a resource. Friends, this is a tremendous amount of resources. Please in the chat, unless you object, I hope I could at some point post these links to a blog post. So let me know in the chat if you don't want me to do that, because this is very, very resourceful. But Margaret Keene follows up with my clumsy observation, and she says textbook publishers must be feeling some pressure to improve their accessibility? ? How come they haven't made everything accessible? I guess is the question I would ask for that.
I think some of the bigger publishers are responding to this. So in the Inside Higher Ed piece I wrote, I mention an example of one of our health sciences professors has an online textbook that has some really good accessible resources, including complex interactive models of structures like the larynx. And so a linguistics professor was able to make use of that model in a linguistics course because it's accessible and it had, screen reader interaction capability. I didn't interact with the model with a screen reader, so I'm lacking a little specificity here in my description. But it was much more robust than, the 20-year-old copy that she'd been using from a textbook previously, in terms of accessibility and engagement.
Thank you. That may be one sign of progress. There's another ally, sorry, lowercase a, not the random one to mention. Our good friend Eileen Frank, longtime Future Transform participant, says, we librarians have concerns about the databases, articles, ebooks, and video that we license. So what is the role of academic libraries in making academic content accessible?
I work really closely with our libraries on this. So I mean, we really are, I feel, beholden to the publishers to do some of this work on the back end, and many of them are doing it. And our librarians, our research librarians who liaise with faculty, are teaching them about how to recognize whether a document is accessible, teaching them alternative pathways to find resources. There are some collections of accessible content that are available specifically for learners who have a diagnosed and documented disability. Like once they unlock those services, they can get access to things that would normally be maybe behind a paywall or that haven't been converted yet. There's a consortium in Virginia that's working on that, and I forget the name of that group. So if somebody knows it, put it in the chat.
Please do.
There it is, Emma. There it is.
Man.
And it may not be just Virginia. I apologize if I am being state specific when we're not state specific there.
I just want to call it, that was from Amy Kokenhauer.
Lucky Trust is the other one, yeah.
And Amy was a brilliant student of mine back in the 1990s. So it's great to see her here. But Jennifer Vinipal says Emma is shutting down.
There's no bad news allowed in the Future Trends Forum. I don't want to hear that.
if only. Jennifer, is there a story you can share about that? Thank you, Jennifer. She's going to look into that. But while she's doing that, we had some going back to the publisher question. We had a couple of really good comments. Matt Harris says lots of book publishers have had this pressure recently due to the European Accessibility Act, calling out ebooks as a service that is required to be accessible. So that's important to remember, that European law impacts us in these ways, like the GDPR law. Carolyn Coward gives, for the first time ever, gives praise to Elsevier for committing time, resources, and staff to making their content accessible, as well as creating a librarian's accessibility advisory board. Bravo. But we had a question from Noah Geisel, which is about industry. Yes, so what are the opportunities for higher education to collaborate with industry that might also be tackling similar challenges in parallel to us? Even if just the companies that have software doing business with higher education, from LMS vendors to Google, do you see valuable possibilities in collaborations?
Yes, absolutely. I think that industry university partnerships can move a lot of levers. So many in the industry are invested in having a workforce that is diverse and differently abled in some cases. So I think there's a vested interest there in providing supports and education and resources that will help the workforce.
Good point. I wonder if that would really appeal to individual academics, departments, and units, but also institutions that are especially connected with workforce development, thinking about community colleges, for example, thinking about pre-professional programs. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Friends, we have 15 minutes left, and we have a whole bunch of ideas to bring up. And I would love to mention some of them, but I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share their thoughts. And again, if please use the chat box. And oh my gosh, I completely misclicked on the Q&A box, so I missed a great question. Here we go. This is from Carolyn Coward, who asks, how does William and Mary handle reasonable accommodation for students who need various accessible materials? Does it go through your office, through the professor, through the department? And also, how are students helped to feel comfortable and empowered to request accommodation?
I don't have a student-facing role, so I don't have as much wealth of knowledge about how William and Mary handles the student side of things. The perspective I have is that many students don't necessarily disclose disability status, who do in fact qualify or maybe did qualify in their secondary career for accommodations and modifications to the curriculum. A lot of them get to William and Mary, and either because they don't know, or because they haven't had to advocate for themselves before, and now they do, as adults. They just don't know how to navigate that right away. And so what I do know from my colleagues in student services is that right around midterms is when students who initially did not secure services or did not disclose those needs for accommodations start showing up with questions and trying to find out how can I turn this ship around now that the pressure and the stakes are higher.
Well, again, we come back to so much of accessibility based on behavior. So it's not only the behavior of the supporting institutions members, faculty, support staff, but it's also the students being able to advocate for themselves, which is a whole other issue. Thank you again, Carolyn, for the question. Normally at this point in the program, I'm going to tell people, please don't be shy to ask questions, but the questions just won't stop, which is fantastic. I mean, Diana, you're really hitting a major theme here. Noah asks a follow-up question on a different point. Diana mentioned UPSEA. Will anyone else from this community be at their Convergence conference in DC in a few weeks? So if you will be, just please answer Noah in the chat. I'll be in DC myself, but I don't know if I'm going to that conference. It would be good to see you though, if I could. And Jennifer is doing her best to find more examples and more questions. But since I'm apparently Noah's biggest fan today, I want to give him a chance to ask one more question, because Noah is on fire with this. Piggybacking on Brenda Boyd's point of RFP practices being a lever to support accessibility. So let me just mention that if we didn't discuss that. Brenda pointed out that purchasing is a really great point where you can impose accessibility requirements. So thank you for that, Brenda. There are now, Noah goes on, there are now some product certifications. I think Digital Promise has an inclusive product design certification. Perhaps we could write such certifications related to accessibility practices into RFPs as a way of putting an accessibility finger on the scale. No, I think I've seen that before, but I want to make sure I'm right about this. Is this something, Diana, that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, for us, anytime we put a request through procurement for a new software or digital technology, that is part of the consideration. We do have to provide information about how accessible that product is. And even at the point of annual renewal for products that we've already had approved, they're looking for updated information about accessibility. So I agree. If you are at a smaller organization or institution that maybe hasn't developed or defined those workflows, that's a great opportunity for advocacy to go to your IT department, your procurement professional or contact, whoever your point of contact is, and to say, this is something we should be thinking about, and this is where we can catch things before they get purchased or adopted.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a great comment from Margaret Keene. And this is great, Margaret, because I was going to ask this question, so you nicely anticipated it. Alt text generally goes through DSS, but yes, for various reasons, students don't always disclose. NCES, it's federal data, their latest survey shows 21% of undergrads identifying as having a disability, but many offices are not seeing this rate of registration, presumably meaning they are seeing much lower rates. So my question is, roughly what proportion of the academic population, and I'm including everybody, students, faculty, and staff, roughly what proportion suffer from some form of visual impairment that will need accommodation? Are we talking 5%, 1%, 10%?
I typically cite the statistic 10 to 15%. And I do that framing it to say like, hey, we want you to still do supportive things that are supportive of 85% of your population who might not have a diagnosed disability. 10 to 15 is a really, that's a made up statistic, you know? So I see this NCES number, the 21%. I'm curious to know more about that. So I'm gonna click on that link to save it because I'm curious about how they defined disabilities and when students were disclosing them, what types of things they were including. I suspect the level with specific visual impairments is a much lower percentage. But again, this is something that in our framing, at least we try to de-emphasize even presence of disability as a motivator for accessibility work. And we really talk about just designing with learner variability in mind and learner preference in mind. So when I make content accessible in alternative formats, I'm also supporting student athletes who are having long bus rides to games at night and may not be able to read all of their course readings on the bus and prefer to listen to them. You know, we're, especially when we talk about providing the audio to an otherwise like text-based resource, we're benefiting students who are working parents and are the only time for them to catch up on course reading is while they're also making dinner and picking kids up and taking them to soccer. So when we do things to make our content more accessible, we really do benefit much, much higher numbers than just the people who've registered at the Disability Service Office. I feel like I'm very much preaching to the choir because the people who are on this call right now are already like subscribed to that. But I did just need to say that that's the way that we're framing the work.
Well, it's important for the record, but it's also it's important just as historical framing so that we know how to think about this.
Yeah.
Margaret adds to this an increase in mental health diagnoses. And with that, Lynn Bellow at Muhlenberg. Lynn, please say hi to my friends at Muhlenberg. She says, students who are neurodivergent sometimes also request the same kinds of accommodations that visually impaired students do for greater ease of engagement. For everyone interested in neurodivergence, we had a forum session last week about supporting neurodivergent faculty and staff. So that recording is on the website if you haven't seen it already. So thank you for that question. And again, Carolyn Coward, who is also on fire on this, points out that accessibility leads us to universal design. And Laura Foley adds to that, you can have accessibility without UDL. You cannot have UDL without accessibility. So again, pushing for UDL is really, really important. And Margaret Keene adds ELL students for captioning, also UDL.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, Diana, I know you didn't want to have bad news on the forum, but the forum, as all futures do, is we look at the dark side as well as the bright side. And as we were talking, multiple people have been plunging into the record to try to figure out what's going on with Emma and Amy Kokenauer and Eileen Frank and quite a few others have found that, and Jennifer Vinopoli especially, have found that it's due to be turned off September 15th. So there's a link to the homepage about that, which is very sad. But thank you all for finding the research for that. And Meryl Poku mentioned something. This is great, Meryl. Thank you. This is an example I haven't heard before. But she says this. It reminds her of a disability analogy of a staircase's handrail. It's there for the people who need it every day, but also available for people who may want to use it on occasion.
Mhm.
And what I was going to say, and Laura Fuller beat me to the punch, is it's the curb cut effect.
Mhm.
Which I think perhaps everyone's familiar with this, which is a great design principle. You take a street curb and you cut it in order to smooth the way for people with mobility impairments, people with walkers, canes, and chairs, and so on. But that also improves the way for everybody else. It's just beneficial for everybody. So the curb cut principle is just a fine one indeed. We usually at the end of the hour, we think more and more about the future, Diana. And I'm curious if I could ask you to imagine something. What would a college and university look like if they took accessibility seriously? If they committed to it institutionally, in terms of their mission, in terms of their budgeting, what might that institution look like as opposed to what we have now?
Wow. A lot more resources. I don't think that it is always reasonable to ask instructors to engage in this work at the level of detail that the technology currently requires, especially because they aren't rewarded in the career sense for having, or salary sense for having accessible content. So it's, all stick and no carrot right now. We would love to see more, students being trained in how to make content accessible. I know somebody mentioned earlier, like this is a life skill to know how to do this. And I completely agree. I think it's a skill that will be valued in the workplace more than what's being recognized on a lot of college campuses right now, to have knowledge and awareness and just be thinking that way of like, how can I make content that is accessible to more viewers, customers, however we want to frame that outside of the higher ed landscape. And and a lot of it comes down to putting, money behind it, not just mandates.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there are changes to the population of learners that might argue for more money? That is, are we seeing more people with visual disabilities or other forms of disabilities?
I don't know if the total numbers have changed, but I know that many higher ed institutions now are very interested in making college accessible to more people and increasing enrollment, or at least keeping enrollment steady. And that means leveling the playing field and democratizing access to education. So I don't think that we can sustain the business model without opening the door for more types of learners and more learner variability.
I've been in my own work, I've been arguing that what we might be experiencing now is a shift from quantity to quality of having more and more, shifting from the massification model of just getting as many students as possible in the door to dealing with perhaps smaller numbers, but a higher quality of experience. I think this would fit under that very, very nicely. In the in the chat, Gina Rue shares a very good cartoon. Thank you, Gina. And Rue is apparently the right word in this case. I want to wrap things up with one particular point, and this is one that Dana Dawson mentioned that I think was beautifully phrased. She says this: one of my colleagues pointed out that this current effort is an extension of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prompted a sea change in how we think about physical accessibility in the 1990s. Now we're starting to think about digital accessibility in the same way we previously had to get our heads around accessibility in physical spaces. So I think it may be that this is a whole historical tide turning, and Diana, you're at the leading edge of helping make it happen.
Yeah.
I just want to credit Danny O'Brien, who is our accessibility specialist at the Center for the Advancement of Teaching at Temple University, for that one, because that was really Danny who shared that with me.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. But friends, I have to, with a great deal of regret, I have to wrap things up. We are at the top of the hour. I have to say, Diana, it's been wonderful being with you. This has been a master class in accessibility. You've been so helpful and sharing generously from your experience and your hard-won wisdom. What's the best way for people to keep up with you and to follow your work?
Oh, yes. Find me on LinkedIn or William and Mary. I'd love to connect with more of you. Some of you already sent me requests and I happily accepted them. So
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we can find you on LinkedIn.
yes.
And especially as everybody continues their work. Hopefully, everybody here on trying to make all kinds of educational materials more and more accessible for more and more people. Thank you so much, Diana. Continue the good work, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invite. I enjoyed it very much.
Pleasure. And everybody else, just to wrap things up, thank you all for your string of fantastic questions and all the information and wisdom that you generously shared. Thank you all very much. We have sessions coming up covering a wide range of topics, everything from enrollment to AI, and we're scheduled right through December. So please go to the forum website, forum.futureofaducation.us, if you'd like to find more. And from there, you can find our link to our YouTube archive, which now cracked 450 recordings. So if you'd like to look back, we have quite a bit of information to see. In the meantime, the fall semester is raging on, so everybody has to get back to their own work. Please, everybody, please take care. Take care of yourselves, be safe and well, and we'll see you next time online. Bye-bye.